Good evening, everyone. I'm Laura Ingraham. This is the Ingraham Angle from Washington tonight. This is a Fox News alert. A source telling Fox Trump is pausing all U.S. military aid to Ukraine until he determines the Ukrainians show a commitment to good faith peace negotiations. More news when we get it. But first, the new Red Scare. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Now, since their Nazi and Hitler strategy hadn't really paid off, Democrats have racked their tiny little brains for a new line of attack. Now, what is it? Two words, starting with the letters K and O. Now, wait for it.
Everyone who signs up to work for Donald Trump is signing up for one single project, and that is the transition of American democracy to a kind of kleptocratic oligarchy in which the billionaires rule, in which they get to steal from regular Americans.
Wow, kleptocratic oligarchy, Chris. Big words. You must be smart. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is one of the Democrats' early top contenders for 2028.
If that's the domestic project, then the way to normalize that kind of government is to associate yourself with similar governments abroad, like the Kremlin.
OMG, this isn't even a new strategy. This is warmed over Russian collusion. Oh, how original. It was just 3 days after the man dressed like Captain Spock was booted without lunch from the White House. We're getting a much clearer picture tonight of how things went down and why President Trump is the only politician telling the full truth here. But first, we have to remember how we got here. The U.S. government has been involved in Ukraine for many years. And, by the way, to mixed results. And no one knows that better than Chris Murphy himself, because he, with key Republican senators, helped usher in the ouster of Ukraine's President Viktor Yanukovych back in 2014. Now, Murphy himself explained why sitting U.S. senators were engaged in what certainly looked like election interference in a country whose president was democratically elected.
Yanukovych was elected. He was chosen in a relatively free and fair election, maybe not by U.S. standards, but we certainly recognized his legitimate right to govern. And when Senator McCain and I went to the square, we were very careful about the words in which we used. We went there in the wake of Yanukovych bringing the police forces onto the square to try to forcibly break up those protests. And we certainly got a lot of grief from people asking why two U.S. senators are going to the square to support a protest movement against an elected government.
Wait, really? Well, we have one problem now. Because they were upset because the president who had been elected was crushing protests. Well, Zelensky himself has not allowed elections. He's outlawed protests. He's banned many Orthodox church services, most of them. He's even banned the use of the Russian language in many instances. Now, some of these measures seem politically popular in Ukraine, but nevertheless, is he really the exemplar of a democratic freedom fighter? Now, look, we all know what Russia's position is. It's a one-man show with Putin ruling with an iron fist. But Trump didn't create this mess, and his handling of this is not the problem. A weak Biden presidency set the stage for this bloody mess. And the region's been in a bloody mess now for 3 years. Now, in November, voters had a choice. Elect Kamala and stay in Ukraine, as Biden said, as long as it takes. Or elect Trump, who pledged to end the war. Well, the voters obviously elected Trump. But the forever war chorus is trying to paint Trump as the outlier.
Ronald Reagan would talk about peace through strength, say you never get to peace with Russians through being weak. That's exactly what's happening right now, though. A show of weakness. Weakness leads to more war, more invasions, more suffering. It's that simple.
Oh, well, simple. Of course, maybe Joe forgot. Peace through strength wasn't just about rebuilding our military. It was about rejuvenating our economy. And ours is currently weighed down with $36 trillion and counting in debt. And, interest payments on that debt exceed $1 trillion annually. And yet we're still deficit spending like there's no tomorrow. That is not strength. That is weakness. A dynamic Trump is trying mightily to turn all of it around. It's going to be hard. But again, the think tank crowd, and they live in an alternative reality, apparently still believes that America's patience and resources are unlimited. But given our economic condition and the public mood, Trump's dedication to peace toward reducing America's involvement in this war, as we learned tonight with a pause of military aid, it's perfectly in line with past Republican presidents. Remember, Eisenhower won the presidency in large part because he pledged to extract us from the Korean War, and that's what he did. So was he collaborating with the communists? And in 1956, of course, he didn't stop the USSR from taking Hungary. And we didn't get involved when they took Czechoslovakia in 48, and when the Soviet Union crushed the Prague Spring in 1968. It was ugly, but it wasn't our battle to fight. Now, did any of this mean that these presidents were sympathetic to the people in charge? Of course they weren't. Of course, it's ridiculous to think that. And remember, our brave troops were bogged down and dying in the Vietnam War. And it was a war that Nixon ultimately had to end. Now, did this mean he was pro-North Vietnamese? Of course not. Reagan pulled out of Lebanon after 241 U.S. service members were slaughtered there. Was that weak? Or was it pragmatic? Now, neither Donald Trump nor his supporters are rooting for Putin. But they see the world as it is, not as some fantasy created by those who profit off bloodshed. Of course, the legacy media, though, they're going to always rally against the Trump agenda. They used to be for peace, but no longer. But they're going to rally against Trump no matter how reasonable his position is.
Some of your Republican allies are puzzled by the steps that President Trump has taken to placate Vladimir Putin. I want to bring up a post that Lisa Murkowski.
Well, which ones? What steps has the president taken to placate?
Let me show you what. Lisa
are we arming the Russians?
Are
we providing economic assistance to the Russians? Have we given the Russians $180 billion? What are we doing to placate? The only thing we've done is say, are you guys willing to talk about peace?
Trump's not naive here. He knows what Putin is like. Just like Nixon knew what Mao was like, and Eisenhower knew what Khrushchev was all about. Voters want to take care of the home front, which is hurting. We all know it. They want us to have more friends and fewer foreign obligations. But look, we're not in a great situation now because the Uniparty blew the massive economic and geopolitical advantage that we had as a country, which Reagan's policies made possible. We ended up losing in Iraq, losing in Afghanistan, and now a stalemate in Ukraine. In a war, our money and our weapons, even if not, thank goodness, our men and women made possible, our troops. Public opinion is, so far, in Trump's favor. 51% favor his handling of the Russian-Ukraine situation, 49% disapprove. But compare this to how they rated Biden. 61% disapproved of Biden's handling of the war. Only 39% approving. Those are the ones who still thought he had all his marbles. But here's the bottom line. The delusional types who promised us victory in Ukraine, remember it was going to be quick? And of course in Afghanistan and also in Iraq, the surges kept coming, the money and weapons kept flowing. Now they're wailing, but there's a reason why they are no longer in charge and why a pro-interventionist Republican has not won the presidency since 2004 and likely will never win the presidency, not in our lifetime. So right now, it's Trump's job to clean up the mess the old establishment left behind, and that is exactly what he's trying to do.
He got kicked out of the White House on Friday. The staff ate his lunch, and he spent the weekend flapping his gums. Ukraine's president told the AP, the end of the war is very, very far away. Trump says, you sure about that?
President Zelensky supposedly made a statement today in AP. I'm not a big fan of AP, so maybe it was an incorrect statement, but he said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time. And he better not be right about that. That's all I'm saying.
A senior White House official tells Fox everything is on the table. And breaking tonight, Fox News alert, the U.S. is hitting the brakes on arms to Ukraine. The Trump administration has stopped financing new weapons sales to Zelensky. and is considering completely freezing weapons shipments from our stockpiles, pausing military aid to Ukraine. So Zelensky does the right thing. Isn't that what Democrats impeached him for? Why aren't Democrats calling for impeachment? Suddenly it's not a high crime and misdemeanor. I guess not. This move will certainly bring Zelensky back to the bargaining table.
We should be more appreciative because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us because, as you know, that's right there. That's the border. I'm not knocking Europe. I'm saying that they were a lot smarter than Joe Biden because Joe Biden didn't have a clue. He just gave money hand over fist, and they should have been able to equalize with us. In other words, if we gave $1, they should have given. Well, we gave $350 billion. They probably gave $100, but on top of it all, they get their money back because they're doing it in the form of a loan, and it's a secured loan. So when I saw that, which I've known about for a little while, I said it's time for us to be smart.
Trump right on Truth Social saying Europe has spent more money buying Russian oil and gas than they have spent on defending Ukraine by far. Elon says it's time to leave NATO. That's probably a good cop, bad cop play. And the Europeans are already feeling the heat. Over the weekend, they pledged billions more in defense spending, which is exactly what Trump's been urging them to do for 10 years. And this benefits the United States because we've always wanted a more beefed up European military alliance to deter Russia. And if the Europeans take the lead in defending Ukraine, they're even considering putting European boots on the ground, America can take a breather and replenish our stockpiles, which are running dry. So we're combat ready for China in case they try something. But making our allies step up is treason to our good old friend Rach.
I think whatever Americans voted for, I don't think people voted to make the United States a subsidiary diplomatic entity to Vladimir Putin, which is the way that Trump is operating here. One of the things that we saw today were leaders of democracies from all over Europe publicly thanking Zelensky today, standing with him in solidarity after this meeting with Trump. You know, you talk about whether or not the United States is any longer associated with the free world.
America has a history of doing business with Russia. JFK used to write secret letters to Khrushchev behind the CIA's back in an attempt to end the Cold War. Reagan and Gorbachev had a record number of summits and signed historic arms treaties. The Gipper and Gorby had a great relationship. Bush looked into Putin's eyes and saw into his soul. And Hillary tried so hard with Moscow, she handed them a reset button to reset their relationship. Trump knows Putin's a snake, but isn't he just resetting the relationship to bring peace?
All we're trying to do here is figure out whether a peace is possible. All these other things that people keep bringing up, that'll have to be a part of a negotiation. Right now, there is no negotiation. Shouldn't we at least try to see if there is a way to end this war in a way that's acceptable to both sides and is enduring and sustainable? How is that a bad thing? I really am puzzled why anyone thinks that trying to be a peacemaker is a bad thing. It's only a bad thing when it's Donald Trump trying to do it. When it's President Trump, it's absurd to me. Shouldn't we all be happy that we have a president who's trying to stop wars and prevent them instead of start them? And I just don't get it. I really don't, other than the fact that it's Donald J. Trump. If this was a Democrat that was doing this, everyone would be saying, well, he's on his way to the Nobel Peace Prize. This is absurd.
Ever since Hillary blamed Putin for stealing the election, Democrats had an enemy they actually wanted to fight. Before that, Bill Clinton was making speeches in Moscow for $500,000. House Oversight says Moscow sent Hunter Biden $3 million checks. Now the Democrats want to look tough and fight an unwinnable, winless proxy war. Now, the Ukrainians, the Europeans, the Russians, the Americans all want the war to end, except the Democrats don't. We thought Zelensky wanted the war to end, but then something happened.
It takes two to tango, and you're going to have to make a deal with Russia, and you're going to have to make a deal with Ukraine. I think everybody has to get into a room, so to speak, and we have to make a deal. And the deal can be made very fast. It should not be that hard a deal to make. It can be made very fast. Now, maybe somebody doesn't want to make a deal. And if somebody doesn't want to make a deal, I think that person won't be around very long. That person will not be listened to very long because I believe that Russia wants to make a deal. I believe certainly the people of Ukraine want to make a deal. They've suffered more than anybody else. We talk about suffering. They've suffered.
White House sources say Zelensky has 3 strikes. Strike 1 was tearing apart the mineral deal they had weeks ago.
I was personally very upset because we had a conversation with President Zelensky, the vice president and I, the 3 of us, and we discussed this issue about the mineral rights. And we explained to them, look, we want to be in a joint venture with you, not because we're trying to steal from your country, but because we think that's actually a security guarantee. And he said, sure, we want to do this deal. It makes all the sense in the world. The only thing is I need to run it through my legislative process. They have to approve it. I read 2 days later that Zelensky's out there saying, I rejected the deal. I told him, no way, that we're not doing that. Well, that's not what happened in that meeting. So you start to get upset by somebody. We're trying to help these guys.
Strike 2 was walking into the White House without a suit. The White House asked Zelensky to wear a suit to the meeting, just as a sign of respect. And Zelensky shows up in a long-sleeve T-shirt and cargo pants. Strike 3 was inside the Oval Office.
The tragedy of Friday, and I don't know what President Zelensky was thinking, we had President of France, Emmanuel Macron, in on Monday. Great meeting. We had Prime Minister Keir Starmer on Thursday. Fantastic meeting. They were all on board the arc of the peace agreement. All President Zelensky had to do was come in and sign this economic agreement, and again, show no daylight between Ukrainian people and the American people, and he chose to blow that up.
So the deal's no longer on the table, just to be abundantly clear.
Not at present.
One White House senior advisor says, I'm not sure this is salvageable. 3 strikes and you're out. It's not like Zelensky wasn't warned. Ukraine-friendly members of Congress were prepping him ahead of time. One person in the room told Politico this: everyone was giving him the same advice, which was get the deal done. Don't play games, and be very appreciative of everything that Trump and the administration have done. Lead with thank you for everything that you've done and get the deal done. But Zelensky didn't even say thank you, just like he didn't say thank you to Biden. When Biden screamed at him on the phone in 2022 and told him to show a little more gratitude, Zelensky just brushed it off. So what happened? Well, 40 minutes before this meeting in the Oval, Zelensky was meeting with Senate Democrats. Democrat Senator Chris Murphy said, quote, just finished a meeting with President Zelensky here in Washington. He confirmed that the Ukrainian people will not support a fake peace agreement where Putin gets everything he wants and there are no security arrangements for Ukraine. So Murphy got in his head. And less than an hour later, Zelensky starts a fight with Trump and Vance and blows up the deal again. And then Murphy gets on TV and says this.
The White House has become an arm of the Kremlin. Every single day, you hear from the National Security Advisor, from the President of the United States, from his entire national security team, Kremlin talking points. For the last week, the White House has been pretending as if Ukraine started this war. That's essentially saying that Poland invaded Germany at the beginning of World War II.
Look at this dirty little trick. Sabotage a peace deal so you can call Trump a Russian puppet. Democrats don't even have a peace plan. They don't even have a plan to win this war. Their only plan is to keep it going so you can call Trump a traitor for trying to end it. President Biden was caught telling donors here in Manhattan that this country has never been so close to nuclear Armageddon. All Trump's trying to do is stop World War III, and the American people want it stopped too. 72% of Americans want Ukraine to negotiate a settlement, and 60% of the country agrees with the way Trump's going about it, negotiating directly with Russia. Ending the war lowers energy prices, which brings down inflation. It also heals the world's messed up supply chain, which also brings down inflation. It boosts European defense spending and saves American combat power for the Pacific. Lets us focus on more urgent problems like the Iranians and the Chinese. And these sanctions we have up, they hurt the dollar as the world currency because it drives other nations to trade in other denominations. And it drives the Russians away from a deepening alliance with the Chinese and gives us a new market for minerals that our tech sector is going to need in the arms race. So Zelensky says he's still ready to sign the minerals deal, but he's got to do one thing first.
I have been told by a senior official here that nothing's going to happen with this minerals deal until Zelensky goes in front of cameras and makes an explicit public apology for the way that he behaved himself.
Philosophers throughout the history of time have warned about the excesses of pride And this looks like a prime example. America is a very forgiving nation. Donald Trump has shown that he can work with people who've called him some of the worst names imaginable. So this is a very fluid situation. We've apologized to other countries before, so there's nothing wrong with having other countries apologize to us.
And welcome to Hannity. And tonight we are back in the Washington swamp, the sewer, as we love to affectionately call it. And we are here to give you all an inside look into the incredible first few weeks of Donald Trump's second term. Just a few hours ago, we were at the Eisenhower Executive Office building just across from the White House for an exclusive interview with Vice President J.D. Vance. That full interview is only moments away. We'll also be joined right here on set by White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. We'll get our Hannity White House briefing, and the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi. We'll talk about Epstein. We'll talk about a lot more. But first, breaking tonight, the United States is pausing all military aid to Ukraine until the country makes a commitment to good faith peace negotiations. This after the Ukrainian President Zelensky proclaimed that peace is, quote, still very, very far away. Now, keep in mind that Zelensky has already been given many, many opportunities to team up with the U.S. on a peace deal. And according to my numerous sources, Zelensky is now asking to come back to the White House, and he would now finally sign off on what he should have signed off on last week, and that is the rare earth minerals agreement that would bind our two countries together. But it's not going to happen when the president of Ukraine seems to want war in perpetuity, a war without the U.S. and without European money he could never even fight. Anyway, on Truth Social, President Trump called Zelensky's recent comments, quote, the worst statement that could have been made, and America will not put up with this much longer. This guy doesn't want there to be peace as long as he has America's backing. Don't forget, the rare earth mineral deal, that would be just phase one of President Trump's peace plan. The deal would put U.S. business interests on the ground in Ukraine, which itself would provide a significant deterrent to Vladimir Putin. It would also help Ukraine pay back the debt to the United States while also ensuring that U.S. funding continues and provide massive amounts of money that country will desperately need to rebuild their country. This keeps going, there's not going to be a country to rebuild. Phase two would be a ceasefire agreement, and phase three would be the negotiated settlement. This would be the hard part, and peace, hopefully, in Europe as a result. Zelensky can't even bring himself to sign off on phase one. Last week's tense meeting at the White House, in spite of what the fake news legacy media mob is telling you, was not an ambush. It was supposed to be a show of unity. It was supposed to be celebrating what was a done deal. It was supposed to be mostly ceremonial in nature. In fact, it was the third time Zelensky was supposed to sign off on that very same deal before trying to relitigate the agreement in the Oval Office at the last minute. But of course, the hysteria and anti-American sentiment in Europe is now spiking. Good luck on their own. One major gas company, Norway, vowed to boycott our U.S. Navy, refusing to refill our ship. Really? Norway, they stepped in. They're now promising that will not be the case. On X, only moments after Zelensky's contentious meeting at the White House, multiple European leaders posted their unwavering support for Zelensky's seemingly endless war. Then they hosted Zelensky for a meeting where they showered him with praise. Now, as Lindsey Graham said, if Europe wants to take this on all by themselves and protect their own continent, they're free to do so. But as Donald Trump pointed out on Truth Social, Europe, in the meeting they had with Zelensky, stated flatly they cannot do the job without the U.S. Probably not a great statement to have been made in terms of a show of strength against Russia. What are they thinking? He's right. President Trump raises a great question. What is Europe thinking? The United States spends nearly $1 trillion annually on defense. All of the countries in the European Union spend just about $326 billion combined. When it comes to funding Ukraine, the same disparity continues. The U.S. has been carrying far more of the financial burden than Ukraine's actual neighbors on their continent. And to top it off, Europe is actually sending more money to Russia. buying oil and gas than aid to Ukraine. In fact, the EU bought a whopping $22 billion in fossil fuels from Russia in 2024 alone. Europe is making Putin filthy rich so he can continue to feed his war machine. America, we should be supplying Europe with all of their energy needs, and hopefully, under Donald Trump's plan, that will soon be the case as we move towards energy dominance. But if you want to know how Putin is funding his war, look no further than the European Union. Now, remember, Trump gave Angela Merkel that white flag of surrender after Germany did that multi-billion-dollar energy deal with Putin. So if Europe wants this war to continue with no end in sight, well, they're going to end up being on their own, and it's not going to end very well. And I'd like to see the killing stop. I'd like to see the destruction stop. And I'd like to see at least the rebuild of a country before it's too late. But as President Trump stands ready and willing to make a deal, earlier tonight, I asked Vice President J.D. Vance about this and so much more.
Shots fired.
Just a legal question. I don't know why it's so upsetting. I don't make the rules in this country. All right. So Friday, Zelensky entered the White House in his military fatigues and left with a boot up his ass. If we would have insulted America any worse, Jane Fonda would have banged him. Talk about... Thank you. You never know what works. But talk about a disaster. That may have been the messiest scene in the Oval Office since Bill Clinton used a blue dress for target practice. So in the interest of world peace, let's address Zelensky directly. Dude, you got to drop the Napoleon complex. As a short guy, I'm an expert. I know what it's like to have a parade described to me by a tall 12-year-old. But you got to accept that you need us far more than we need you. It's the same thing I told my foster kids. And however righteous your cause is, America voted for a guy who doesn't want to embroil this country in another war where we empty the treasury into an endless graveyard. This isn't 2022, and you're not dealing with an old man who couldn't tell Europe from Gilligan's Island. A lot's changed. First of all, for all the talk of Trump being a fascist, right now, it's Trump and his crew who are the only ones talking peace. Because just like the chaos of an open border or the crime caused by defunding the police, wars sure look exciting to those who don't have to fight them. Just ask Tim Walz. But Vlad needs to understand what is actually meant by a deal. It means you're not going to get everything you want. You're going to have to bend a little, a lot actually. Because as Trump said, you don't have the cards to play no matter what your Democrat buddies are telling you. You're at the kids' table, and you're still not the tallest one there. See, Vlad got tricked by the people who can't save him, i.e. the Dems he campaigned with last year and met prior to meeting Trump last Friday. Today, they're about as influential as Dylan Mulvaney at a men's retreat. And while it's good to see Europe has your back, Vlad, you're asking them to kick Russians out of Ukraine when they can't even kick Hamas out of London. Burn. The Dems used Vlad to provoke a fight with Trump so they could poke the bear that is Trump. In a way, they're like your loudmouth friend who starts a fight in a bar and then tells you, go ahead, I'll hold your coat. Zelensky got played. He got snotty with the one group of people on this planet in a position who could save his ass. I mean, imagine being the guy who's about to go to the electric chair, but then you get a call from the governor and you end up telling him that his wife is fat. That's Vlad. And the people who wrote your script for you, America's hapless Dems, have been wrong on every issue. All those dopes who say what Trump and Vance did was awful were the same people who said Biden was sane. Meaning if Adam Kinzinger, Jen Psaki, Morning Joe, and CNN think Friday was the worst, then you know it was the best. Even more, not knowing where half the money we sent to Ukraine is, not a good look, especially when we have a few budget problems of our own. See, Vlad, you're no longer dealing with an old fart who was last seen getting his casket tailored. Got a new president, and he won't get talked down to by a man who's 5'3" and dressed like a cat burglar. So, President Z, you're stuck where so many Trump antagonists are these days, in opposition to common sense. This is not America's war. I know that's confusing because most of our wars aren't. But America voted for the guy who says he'll end this one, and not that cackling hyena who couldn't find Ukraine on a map of Ukraine. Thank you. Trump sees an endless war for what it is, a mountain of dead.
I want one thing to happen. I want all of those young people to stop being killed. They're being killed by the thousands every single week. Last week, 2,700 were killed. 2,700 young, in this case, just about all young boys from Ukraine and from Russia. And that's not young people from the United States, but it's on a human basis. I want to see it stop. The money is one thing, but the death. And they're losing thousands of soldiers a week.
Now, you can't get more sensible than that, which is why all the Dems can do right now is question Trump's methods. Oh, he's such a bully. He's so mean. It's the same thing said about DOJ, the border, men and women's bathrooms, and about everything that requires the sense and brains of an adult. But look, Vlad, we could help pull those minerals out of the ground, partner with solid American businesses so that Putin wouldn't dare try it again. After all, Putin never attacked Ukraine with Trump in office. So, buddy, it's time you recognized who your friends really are. It ain't the Dems whispering sweet nothings into your ear. It's the guy who dressed you down in front of the world. So put on your big boy pants, even if it means shopping at Baby Gap. Let's welcome tonight's guest. She's our favorite ham after glazed and honey baked. Outkick columnist Mary Catherine Ham. His act is a lot like your Netflix password, easy to forget. Comedian Adam Hunter. She's part Scottish, part Romanian, and part lens crafters. Host of the Kennedy Saves the World podcast, Kennedy. And he's like the Jolly Green Giant, except the Jolly and the green part. New York Times bestselling author, comedian, and former NWA World Champion title. MCAT, always a pleasure to see you. I don't see you enough.
I know, it's true.
It really is true, but I did install a camera in your apartment, so that's good. Hey, so basically, isn't this always the case now? Trump will do something that essentially everybody agrees with, and then the argument is over the methods. Like, he went too far, he's too mean. It's basically, that's all that's left on the table is methods.
Well, and even if they don't all agree with him, many American voters agree with him. I think that's the shift here. It's Zelensky's job to cut a good deal for the Ukrainian people. It's also his responsibility to understand that the political ground in this country is very different than it was a month ago or 20 years ago. And people want an accounting for what exactly we're going to be doing.
Yeah.
That's what they're asking for.
Yeah, it's our money.
Does seem reasonable.
We kind of need that money. I mean, you know, like, I personally need a pool. Adam, what do you make of this political situation? You've been following politics for decades.
Yes, by decades, I mean weeks. I mean, the method, look, maybe Trump would have been better off asking him to just write down 5 things he accomplished last week. But
you never know.
But, I mean, look, he was dressed in all black. It was Black History Month.
Wait a minute. Go ahead.
Look, and now Trump is saying he might withdraw U.S. troops from Germany, which is how you know Elon Musk is not in charge, because he doesn't pull out of anything.
I could see that joke coming like a Frisbee in the desert. The moment you said withdraw, I go, it's either going to be about Hunter Biden or Elon Musk.
You could see it coming like Elon Musk. So here's the deal. I mean, if you think about it, like, Zelensky was banned from the White House, and like Hunter Biden's dog was allowed to stay. And his dog bit 11 Secret Service people. And look, I love animals, but it might be time to put him down. Not the Hunter Biden. I mean, Joe Biden, the dog. I messed it up by saying Hunter. Okay, go on.
It's okay.
Either one.
It probably was his dog, though.
Yes.
Yeah, Joe didn't know what time of the day it was, you can't expect him to know where the his dog's at.
Thank you. We have gone, speaking of Hunter, off the rails.
Yes.
Oh,
Little.
that's fun.
Our audience has no reference to cocaine. I like that. I like that. Complete silence.
Nope, just that one guy in the back.
One guy going, I know.
Yeah.
I know. Reminds me, I've got to get to a meeting. Kennedy, how are you,
Great,
darling?
wonderful, wonderful to be here with you.
It is great to see
Yes,
you.
I love our fall palette.
Yes. So when you're watching this, I get the sense, like, you've been in negotiations all your life.
I have, Greg.
Was what happened Friday part of a negotiation that happened to be made public because Zelensky made it public? Generally, you walk out of, you can get in fights in negotiations and stuff like that.
Yes, and there's always posturing because both sides, what they're trying to do is get as much as they possibly can in the delicate and fragile time that's kind of like no man's land where, you know, the big aspects of the deal are done, but you haven't actually signed it yet. So there's this little wiggle room window of leverage. But unfortunately, Zelensky didn't have any leverage. And I thought it was so strange that these Democrat senators, for their own good, this is for their own political benefit, are pushing him to go over the edge because they know that Trump and Vance together are going to explode. And all Democrats need is for Trump to look like he's pro-Putin because then they get to kickstart the whole Russia thing again. So as long as they have a boogeyman like Russia and they can try Trump to it, they don't have to have any ideas at all. So it's like Zelensky is bad at negotiating. He's bad at reading American politics and reading the room. And he let the whole thing fall apart because he's falsely confident because we were the ones, to borrow a cocaine analogy, who gave him a bump for so long.
Yes. Yeah, and while he's taking our bumps, he's not telling us that he's taking bumps from other people. So it's like, hey, dude, stop taking our drugs. You're getting drugs from somewhere else. I hate that guy, Dyrus. Was he set up by those bitches?
You know, he wasn't set up by bitches. He was set up by a grown-ass man.
Yeah.
Okay, you got to go back a couple weeks. Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance, VP, had meetings with him where they were laying this deal out, and he pulled that in the room with them.
Right.
Where he was like, well, here's the deal, because they want the mineral rights. And he can't have them with having rights to mineral rights because he's part of the laundering scheme. We got $64 billion missing. What do people do who steal money from other people? They have to replace it with new money. And this new money happens to be controlled by one of the most transparent presidents of all time, President Trump. So when he did that to Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance, he hurt the little feelings. And they went to President Trump and they said, he wouldn't do the deal. And he yelled at us and he called us names. President Trump said, cool, bring his ass to the House. And then, it's what always happens.
Yeah.
He walked up in there with his chest out, and then he started to do the same thing to J.D. Vance.
Yes.
And he even made that little threat. And a lot of people keep missing the fact that he said, oh, you're going to feel it. You're not feeling it now.
Yeah.
You know, you'll feel it later. That was a threat. So that's when President Trump said, all right, enough of this. We ain't feeling nothing. You have no cards to play. And then Zelensky really got nervous, and he was like, we're not playing cards. And like President Trump's like, no, you have no cards to play. And he called him out because he wanted the American people to see it all. Because when this all plays out, you're going to see Zelensky is not in it for the Ukrainian people. He's in it for himself. He has made a lot of money, has missed a lot of elections, and the Democrats have been a willing partner because that $64 billion went somewhere, and now they got to account for it. And you can't get our money now without accounting for it. When you're laundering and taking money, you can't have books. So that's what this is really about. He cannot sign that deal. That's why he pulled that. The president called him out on it.
All right. Well, there you go. Yeah. Take that, Brit Hume.
That Tyrus there seems to know his stuff. I'll be right back. I gotta go to Brit Hume. I'm Brit Hume here, and got some Hannity.
It's not just he does the impression; he even got the little neck fold right.
What does Brit Hume have to do with this?
Brit Hume has nothing to do with this. I just like to be. I just get off doing Brit Hume. Brit Hume.
He stroked himself to Brit Hume.
All right, we got to move on. Up next, the Dems went a long way to hide Joe Biden's decay.